This is the Mountain and Prairie Podcast. I'm Ed Robertson. This is a special live episode recorded this past March at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. It features a conversation I had the honor of moderating with two powerhouse guests, Cate Havstad-Casad of Range Revolution and Daniel Mouw of Duckworth. The title of the panel was Farmer-Founded Brands Will Save American Fashion. At first glance, that might sound like a bold claim, but these two folks are actually doing the work to make it real. Cate is a designer, hatmaker, and regenerative rancher whose company, Range Revolution, is turning discarded cattle hides into regenerative, high-end leather goods. Daniel is the president of Duckworth, a Montana-based wool company that's rebuilding the American supply chain, one sheep, sweater, and ranch at a time. Together, we dug into some big questions, such as, what happened to American-made textiles? Why are most of us walking around wearing plastic? And what would it look like to rebuild rural economies from the ground up, using natural fibers like leather and wool, raised and processed responsibly here in the United States? It might sound like we're talking about fashion and manufacturing trends, but this is really a conversation about values, ecosystems, and the future of rural America. Cate and Daniel are funny, deeply thoughtful, and grounded in the realities of both agriculture and business. They bring hard-earned optimism to a conversation that too often gets bogged down in doom and gloom. And they make a very compelling case for why fashion can be a vehicle for stewardship, beauty, and connection to the land. We also had a sharp, engaged audience that asked some truly insightful questions. You'll hear a few of those towards the end. Thanks so much to Cate and Daniel for the amazing conversation. Thanks to South by Southwest for inviting us, and thank you for listening. Hope you enjoy. My name's Ed Robertson. I've got a podcast called Mountain and Prairie that I started about 9 years ago, and the idea was to talk with interesting people in the American West who are doing important work. And it's brought me in the same orbit with all these just amazing folks, and these two are at the top of the list. I've known Cate coming up on 10 years now, and Daniel and I have just recently become buddies. But they're definitely interesting people. If you don't know about Cate, she, on one day she's making hats for Post Malone. She's Post Malone's chosen hat maker. And then she's a farmer, and then she's got this business we're going to talk about today. And Daniel runs the full spectrum. On one end, he's a highly technical accountant. Then he's got an advanced degree in theology. And then he's doing this important work with wool. So you're in for a treat with these folks. I think just to kind of set the stage, I'll let them introduce themselves, talk a bit about the businesses that they have started, and then we'll go from there. But Cate, you want to get started?
Yeah, thanks so much for coming. Cate Havstad-Casad. My background, I think that's relative to this conversation and our title, Farmer-Founded Brands Will Save American Fashion. I started my career in design and my career in agriculture really at the same time. I began farming with my husband as I was interning to become a custom Western hat maker. And so those two careers have really evolved together over the past 12 years. And the land very much informs all of the work that I do. The art that I create informs all of my work on the land. My journey with Range Revolution, which is the leather goods company, which started in the middle of 2021, it was really based upon what I was learning about supply chains in the regenerative meat sector. So we ranch regeneratively in a very arid region, high desert region of Oregon. And out of necessity, I have had to learn the business of regenerative ranching and of meat production inside and out. And I started to see some glaring issues that were contributing to the economic realities of ranchers right now, which often lead to the degradation of land. And so we'll get more into the waste dilemma, and I'll explain more later, but that's some of the context of how I arrive here.
I'm Daniel Mouw. I'm the president of Duckworth, and we are a Montana-based merino wool company. We were actually founded by a sheep rancher in Dillon, Montana. It's a very small agricultural-oriented community in southwest Montana. But Mr. Helly, the founder, he's been running sheep his entire life. His family has been running sheep his entire life, and he's really been searching for ways to more vertically integrate his ranch with consumer goods. So we're utilizing the wool from these 8 to 10,000 head of sheep there, putting it into our own products, and in so doing, revitalizing the American supply chain, which has been pretty devastated over the last 40, 50, 60 years. I was talking with an American manufacturer last week. We host an annual shear and shred event, which is actually where we shear thousands of sheep. We then go shred a local ski hill called Maverick, where the company was birthed. But I was asking this manufacturer who's been in the American space her entire life how she got into apparel, and it's really the same answer for most of us that find ourselves in American apparel, and we just stumble into it. I do not have a background in clothing. I'm an accountant, as Ed said. I have a theology major, and I have an absolute passion for making high-quality products right here at home and supporting local communities, rural agriculture, yarn spinners, fabric knitters, mills, cut and sew factories here on American soil. I think that's one of the best ways that we can support what we're doing on range lands, is creating avenues for these fibers, for these leathers to get into the supply chain in a value-added way. So, like Cate said, I'm excited to be here and just sharing more about how we can do that together and what we are doing right now and the future together.
Well, I say with my podcast, it's a very selfish endeavor because I learn so much, and I'm just so interested in the people I talk to and what they're doing. And as I was been preparing for this with Cate and Daniel, I've realized how little I really understand about the clothes that I wear. It's kind of similar to when you really start to understand where your food comes from, and then you see the whole world differently. I feel like I've been in that process for the last few weeks. So, Daniel, I wonder if you could give us a brief history lesson on fiber production and production in the United States over the last maybe 70 years, because that's I feel like that sets the tone for everything we're going to talk about, and it's something I didn't know anything about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to go back. So 1950, about 70 years ago, was really the rise of synthetic fibers in the textile space. If there's some graphs that I have in some other documents, I wish I could put them up there, but there's almost no synthetic fibers utilized in textiles in the 1950s, whereas it was mostly natural fibers. In about 1960, there was 1.5 metric million tons of wool being used in the textile space. And in 2023, that figure has dropped to 0.9 metric meter tons, whereas synthetic fibers has exploded to 89.7 metric meter tons. So when we think about synthetics, that's 100 times more use of synthetics than wool in the textile space, which is pretty crazy to think about. Ed, we were talking this morning, we're quite literally walking around in plastic most of the time when we're wearing clothes, which is crazy. It's not a sustainable fiber that we're using. It's a man-made one. The reason that it has grown so rapidly, one is because it's cheaper to produce. And the other reason is we're really trying to replicate what natural fibers can do, and put it in. So it's a pretty drastic change over 70 years. And I think one of the other interesting components of that as well is if we go back even further, the American textiles were founded in the late 1700s. So when we think about that, it's one of the earliest industries that we have in America. Meanwhile, we've started to really see that lose steam over the last 50 years as well, again, with the rise of synthetic fibers. Cheap labor overseas as well has really decimated the American manufacturing space. So it's a pretty big deal. When we start to think about that, we're going to get into that more too, of like just the various costs that are associated with these synthetic fibers that we actually don't internalize too well. So it's pretty crazy. One last stat I just want to throw out there. 1980 in the United States, we were wearing about 70% of the clothing that we produced here in the United States. Today it's 2%. I don't know about you, but it really does bring me to tears to know that we've had these economic powerhouse industries that have been decimated by chasing a penny, by the rise of synthetic fibers. And I think some of the people that are feeling that the most are ranchers and farmers who had those outlets to put their products into to create more value for local economies and local communities. And those have been offshored for the last 50, 60, 70 years.
Yeah. I'm from North Carolina originally, and I think about, where I went to college in Winston-Salem, and that whole area was built on the textile business, and it obviously dried up during my time in college. And again, hiding in plain sight, I never put it all together as what was happening. So when you see it, it's powerful. Cate, could you, to come up to today, 2025, can you talk a bit about some of the challenges that are facing particularly ranchers when it comes to just supply chains and trying to get these products to market, and how difficult it is if you're in the U.S. trying to do it all kind of internally?
Yeah, I'll focus on a couple of key areas. So the current state of the ranching industry in the United States, there are 4 corporations that control 80% of the beef industry in America. That level of consolidation has a lot of implications for the mid-sized family ranches. And by and large, when we talk about the more sustainable, the more regenerative operations, those exist in this sort of supply chain of the middle, agriculture of the middle. And so with that level of consolidation, everything from, the feedlot operations to the processing, the butcheries, what we've lost is systems of aggregation for things like the hides, the bones, the offal, and the fat at scale for this ag of the middle. So what that has resulted in is every year in America, 5 million cattle hides are thrown away. When we send a steer to slaughter to be meat on the table, only 65% of that carcass is getting utilized. And when you are a business person, you're always looking at your margins. And when you think about 35% of every asset going to the waste or trash, there's no such thing as waste in agriculture. And so as I've been studying how we make ranchers more resilient in this country, I started really thinking about that 35%. How do we increase each carcass's utilization? Leathers in particular have such a value in the marketplace if we can get them to the right people. So that's where I'm focused. I do have peers in my world that are working on sending bones to the bone broth companies, tallow to the skincare companies, because tallow as skincare is so hot right now. And offal and the organs to pet treat companies. So we're doing this as a part of an ecosystem, and I happen to be focused on leathers because of my background in design and love for beautiful leather goods. So I think that's a pretty good setting up the stage for the economic situation for ranchers right now.
And Daniel, you've spoken a bit about the wool, but can you give us any more on just kind of the today, what the challenge is facing?
Yeah. Oh, so specific to the wool industry, there's a few pretty big challenges. One is we have 2 commercial scourers, and what that means is we take that greasy wool from the sheep, it goes to the scourers, they clean it, they turn it into wool tops. So we're dependent on 2. And the wool that they service goes into military uniforms. They are probably one of the biggest buyers of American wool. Commercial retail brands like Duckworth is another one of those. We've really devoted ourselves to helping the wool industry out in those ways. And Ed, I think, one thing that we were talking about yesterday is, and this is where I start to tear up, in the last 24 months, we've had about 27 American textile manufacturers close their doors. And again, when we start to think about the economic impacts of that, these are rural communities that are so dependent on these industries that have been staples for 200 years that are just up and gone. There's multiple of them in our own supply chain that have been impacted by that, which creates a pretty big bottleneck of getting products out the door. I think one of the things we'll touch on is that whole fast fashion movement. We are going to advocate for slow fashion. It's so necessary. We cannot continue this cycle where we just create new trends every 2 to 3 months. It's detrimental. And the detriment, again, is to ranch land. It is to ranchers. It's to farmers. It's to rural communities that are dependent on these fibers coming off. And again, to the tune of 27 factories closing their doors in the last 18 to 24 months. Going back to the 1990s, we have lost 500,000 plus jobs in the textile space here in the United States. I'm going to give one example. Hopefully most of you know this company. It's called Woolrich. It's a brand now. When it started, it was not just a brand, it was a whole community. It's a town called Woolrich, Pennsylvania. And it was that for a reason, but it's no longer there. Everything is gone. But this was a community that was providing trash service, utility services, housing for their employees. So we've seen this exodus of manufacturing and textiles overseas that has just ravaged local communities today. So it's a big deal that we try to find these outlets like Cate has with leather to give back to these communities and really tell people that they're valuable. What they're doing is incredibly valuable.
And I think we're reasonable. Like when we look at that pie chart, like we're not, we'll get into like what's happening, the good work that is happening, the rebuilding that's happening. But can we just improve these ratios, right? Can we get back to a little bit more of a more sane balance of the spread of natural fibers in this equation? I don't think we're ever going to see the synthetics disappear. Synthetics have a place, but they should be used very specifically. And maybe we can improve these ratios. And if this pie chart were to shift some percentages, it would make that world of difference for the agriculture industry supplying them.
All right, so we got the history, we got the terrible state we're in. Now we just talk about positive stuff.
Perfect.
That was the negative. And now we got the people that are going to solve the problem. Can we talk a bit about natural fibers and why they are in fact superior to synthetic? Because I love doing stuff outdoors. I love running, fishing, the whole deal. And for my whole adult life, I've been told that the best stuff I can buy is the most highly technical and synthetic and wicking and all those fancy words. But I've learned something new from y'all over the last few weeks. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, specific to wool, again, we've really been trying to replicate what wool can do with synthetic fibers. And the two primary ones are going to be polyester and acrylic. Acrylic was developed to try to get that nice soft feel that wool can provide. And it does so in part, but it can't provide all the other benefits of wool. So when we talk about the natural benefits of wool, we talk about its odor resistance. And I will invite any of you up here to come smell my garments at the end of this. I've been wearing them in Austin. I think it's 90 degrees today. Yesterday was 80. I walked, a couple miles yesterday around town. So you can dare bet I sweated. So, but they're odor resistant, which means I don't have to wash them that often. You don't have to wash them that often because it's going to kill off that smell almost instantaneously. I'm just going to throw this out there for any garment aficionados. I actually will put my garments in a freezer, which will help kill things off as well. So Ed, that's a new one for you today. One of the benefits there is you're not putting it inside a washing machine, which are going to release microplastics into the environment. That is one of the leading drivers of microplastics in waterways, in soils. So that's one. Another really big benefit of wool is its thermoregulating properties. It's going to keep you cool when it's warm, and it's going to keep you warm when it's cool. Again, it's 90 degrees here. I am a little bit hot today because I'm wearing a sweatshirt, but it does a very good job of cooling in temperatures like this. And then as it pertains to this, it's one of the most recyclable fibers in the world. We can use wool up to 6 different times in different opportunities and different products. So it can start in a garment, it can end up in insulation, and when it's done there, you can stick it right back into the ground, and it's going to provide these nutrients to the soil again. And I don't know of another fiber in the world that can do that. So that really brings us back to the biodegradability of wool as a fiber as well. And again, it's not going to leak microplastics into the soils as our synthetics will. So it's a phenomenal fiber for every use. I'm just going to name a few again: clothing, bedding, pillows, sheets, pellets. There's all sorts of uses for wool. Rugs, carpet padding. Yeah, thanks, Cate. So it's phenomenal what you can do with wool.
Well, I think one of the things that people would push back on, and I would have a few weeks ago, is, well, it's more expensive, and I gotta be conscious of my cost. But as we have been talking, I've been preparing, I've learned a lot about real cost. So, could one of y'all discuss the cost, both with the amount of money that it costs, but then the other costs that natural fibers versus synthetics?
Yeah, maybe I'll touch on, there's 2 ways I want to kind of tackle this. One, I want to talk about circularity and cost per use. When, there's an ethics in, a certain sector, the fashion industry, which is buy less, buy better. And we know when we invest in high quality clothing, we're going to get more use out of it. It's going to hold its shape better. It's actually, it's not designed for that like planned obsolescence. Mm-hmm. It actually can be refabricated and, like you said, used over and over again. Once you start introducing more of the polysynthetics into these designs, they do break down. It makes reconstructing them, or it makes end-of-life reconstruction planning pretty difficult, if not impossible. So there's that. Like, you can have these items in your closet forever, and they will look better for longer. And then there's a conversation about internalizing so much of what we have externalized for so long. And what I mean about that is, like, it just depends what you justify as cheap. I think we're all paying a pretty hefty price right now in both microplastics that exist in all of our waterways, no matter where you live. I think we're all paying the price when it comes to just the volume of stuff that is being produced and is polluting. Maybe it's not right here, it's not in our backyard, but it's in somebody's backyard. And so whether it's the price to the planet, or it's the price to other people and their homes, we have not yet come up with a system of accounting that truly internalizes those externalities. But that, I think, is a future of cost accounting. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anything to add to that, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, totally. Maybe not numbers based, but one of the ways that we are internalizing this is inside of our bodies, and we were talking about that yesterday. I mean, we literally have microplastics inside of us right now, which are going to cause health problems down the line. There's no way to avoid it. The skin is one of the largest organs we have, so when we're sticking these plastics on our bodies, it's going to contribute to that as well. But I think one of the other big costs that we typically don't get into, and I think it's becoming more apparent, is just the labor that is used overseas to create our products. And there's good work being done overseas to try to mitigate that. But the fact of the matter is we're still using some forms of slave labor to create our clothes. Just share a quick story. We're working with a manufacturer in Minnesota who was founded by a gal who was working overseas. And she got an opportunity to go to China to see where they were producing some of their garments. And the last trip that she went on there, she was watching a construction company install nets around the dormitories. And the reason for that was because the workers were jumping out of the building. And these are the clothes that we're wearing. So like Cate said, there's a real cost to the clothes that we put on our back or the choices that we make that we should be conscious of. We might not see it in a price per unit, but there's definitely a cost to it that we need to truly think about. Planet, people, all of it.
Yeah. Well, when you think about kind of rebuilding these supply chains that have been slowly eroded away over 70 years, I mean, obviously there's a lot to it, and it's going to take quite a while, but y'all are making great inroads in it. I was wondering if you could just start by talking a bit about how your work helps the actual farmer and rancher on the ground, because in my old life of doing conservation work, I dealt with a lot of farmers and ranchers, and it's a tough business, and they're often just at the whims of these markets, as you know very well, Cate. You know, all these external factors kind of come down the funnel and land on them, and then they're forced to just kind of react. And I feel like the work y'all are doing is giving them more agency and more power in the process. Can maybe just on that most basic bottom of the funnel level, can y'all talk about how your work empowers farmers and ranchers and agriculture folks?
Yeah, I mean, we're just raising their economic margins. So we pay them a price premium for the hides, where typically they are actually paying to dispose of them. So for every animal, they're getting, an increased margin on that work. And my theory is that if we want to see a more regenerative agriculture, the farmers and the ranchers have to have just even the brain space to think creatively and to implement conservation projects. And you can't do that when you're just surviving. So I really just, the heart of it is like the economic realities of producers has to improve for them to have that creativity and space to think outside of the box and try new things. But more than that, they need committed long-term partnerships. And that's why I think when I titled this Farmer-Founded Brands Will Save American Fashion, both of our companies are founded by producers. And producers don't think year to year. Producers don't think quarter to quarter. Producers think generation to generation. We think 7 generations ahead. And so there's a concept of building for perpetuity in our companies, where the commitments to our partners, they are not transient. These are long-term commitments. So, and that's how you really build capacity. Because we've got work to do. We have to, we got to reestablish tanneries. We've got to reestablish all of the processes that actually clean and separate the wools. Like, these are long-term infrastructure projects, so we've got to have long-term commitments. And that's where I feel like farmer-founded brands have a different mindset in which we're planning for that long term.
Yes. I think, Cate, too, one of the things that we've talked about is the farmer and rancher mindset when it comes to these sorts of fibers and natural goods is building it from the ground up. And what we mean by that is we're looking at these fibers, we're looking at these materials and asking the question, what can we do with them that creates more value in the marketplace? So we're designing with that in mind. Using Duckworth as the example there, whenever we shear sheep, we're actually looking at every fleece to figure out what sort of product can that go into. We're not trying to figure out a product and say, this is what we need. We are building it from the fiber forward on all of that. We utilize one of the most technologically advanced pieces of equipment in the wool industry. It's an ODFA 2000 machine. And that analyzes the micron level, that analyzes the strength. And once we know those sorts of metrics, we can then determine where does it go into these products. So the sweatshirt is using a bit more of a coarse wool, and coarse wool typically doesn't have an outlet because you don't want that next to skin. It's a little bit itchy. So put that on the outside. Mm-hmm. We're using our finest fibers to put into next to skin products. And again, I'll invite you all up here. You can feel my undershirt. It's 100% wool. I know the mentality out there is like that thing is going to itch like crazy. It doesn't.
Very soft.
It is incredible. But it's that sort of mindset that we've been talking about. If we have to go to the fiber, we have to go to the fabric, we have to go to the material first and ask the question and be really creative. What can we do with this?
Well, yeah, Duckworth has invested in the correct herd genetics. Mm-hmm. They've literally catered the herd of sheep to make the finest quality wool. So that's a long-term project, and that's just, it's incredible.
Can y'all talk a bit about the role of business and how business can be a solution to some of these large challenges? Because, in my career in the conservation world, I used to work for a nonprofit. I support a lot of nonprofits. I do a lot of these kind of interviews for nonprofit groups that focus on regenerative agriculture or conservation and trying to right some of these systems that have gotten a little bit off kilter. But my previous career was in the business world, and so I'm really, really interested in how for-profit businesses can not only make change, but scale change because the way things work now, whether you like it or not in the United States, it comes down to making money.
Yeah.
And so can you all talk a bit about how you think about the role of business either by itself or in conjunction with nonprofits to help make this change?
Well, I think we're all seeing right now that relying on philanthropic dollars or, say, federally funded grant programs, those are transient. And a lot of the conservation dollars right now are either paused or frozen or under threat. So when that happens, the work stops. So we can't rely on that. It's certainly a complement to it. I've always been a natural entrepreneur myself.
Always.
Just slinging eggs and lemonade and car washes and whatever. But, in particular, I was interested. I spent a decade trying to reach minds through the food on the plate, through the work we do on our farm and our ranch. And I saw an opportunity, especially in the fashion industry, like that great Kate Fletcher quote, "What we wear gives us ecological agency." And the fashion industry, it does touch a sector of pop culture that we haven't quite gotten to yet. And handbags, like these iconic things that become an expression of not just who we are, but who we aspire to be. I think that it's a unique opportunity, like the fashion industry and how we style ourselves. We have an opportunity right now to redefine what is true luxury, we have an opportunity to redefine what is truly aspirational. Is it wealth and status and power? Maybe to some people it will continue to be. But I think that there's a generation of people who truly desire a desire to feel closer to the land, a desire to reconnect to their place in the natural world. And you don't have to be the rancher or the farmer to feel a sense of stewardship. And I think that business, fashion, style, lovely aesthetics, it's a really beautiful way to change hearts, because I think that it's not so much about changing minds. Like, we all know a lot of things. We know we gotta eat healthy. We know microplastics are bad. But we gotta get to that next stage where we start to really change hearts. And I think that happens through beauty. And as designers, as consumers, we can do this beautifully together. So that's my vision of the business world.
Yeah, I mean, it needs to be a partnership, right, Ed? I think there's these not-for-profits out there. They're helping raise awareness on things that are going on in our world and in our culture. And the business is the one that can really take those pieces of information and put it into play in some really practical ways. I'm looking in this room and I don't see anyone who's not wearing clothing. We all need to wear clothes, so why not wear clothes that are made with some form of natural fiber? I see a lot of handbags and purses out here. Why not buy one that is using natural leather rather than faux leather? There's some really small things that we can do as consumers to help drive change. And the ways that we do that is choosing to align with businesses who share those values. But again, it's that partnership mentality of there are really amazing not-for-profits out there doing phenomenal work that we can come alongside and take their ideas and put them into practice and make goods that are beautiful, that people do want, that people do care about. The wool industry, we're working with two of them, and ASI and the American Wool Council. They're doing incredible work out there to help raise the awareness of the benefits of wool and finding outlets for ranchers that are raising good quality wool clips. So it's a partnership mentality. It's a long-term partnership mentality like you were talking about, Cate, that we really need to dive into and do it together. There needs to be a unified front on all of this.
And the sustainable fashion movement is in need of a bit of a rebrand. I was joking with my friends earlier, it can be associated with neutrals, hemp fiber, that crunchy aesthetic, right? It needs a rebrand. We gotta have color. It's gotta be funky. It's gotta speak to trend. We're gonna have Beyonce with a regenerative leather handbag. I swear. But that's the level of pop culture we got to get to. And again, none of us I don't think we can sustain this work if we're just living in the negative, or we're living in that lower level of consciousness and operating. It's got to be beautiful. It's got to be fun. The branding and the marketing has to be joyful. So we are figuring out how to do that through our brands.
Well, that brings me to my next question that I've been thinking about as I've observed all of your marketing materials, and it's all very positive and very welcoming. I think, particularly in the nonprofit space, at least the one that I used to inhabit, there's a certain subset of people that are very passionate about a cause, but the tone, at least the way I interpret it, is, if you don't believe what I believe, you're a bad person, and I can't believe you've got that plastic water bottle there and the whole deal. Whereas I've realized over the last 3 weeks how that I probably should have a different water bottle. But if y'all had come at me and you were saying you're an idiot for having the water bottle, I'd keep it.
Yeah.
And so, can you talk about, both from a philosophical standpoint, but also from a business decision, being effective business people, why choose positive and why choose kind of inspirational, aspirational marketing message versus I told you so, you need to follow?
It doesn't work. Lessons from the land, everything I do is informed by our work on the land. We moved our farm in 2017 to a very farming central of our region. And we've been organic, we've been biodynamically minded since forever, and we were moving to a very conventional area. And had we walked into that new community and waved our organic flag and pointed the finger at our neighbors, no go. We would have lost their alliance. We would have made no impact. Instead, what we've done is over the past 7 years is we've just walked the walk. And we've implemented our cover cropping and our rotational grazing and, are just using poop as fertilizer and our rotations of the crops. And we've sustained ourselves through like really tough years, like extreme drought, extreme weather events, hardship after hardship, I'm not going to lie. But now they're looking at our fields. They're like, wow, your hayfield looks so good. Mm-hmm. They notice things are doing well. And so that has informed, I just think, how I go out in the world and try and make change. The pointing of the finger doesn't work. All farmers are just like natural optimists because you don't make it if you can't be an optimist in farming. Every season there's going to be a new challenge. If you really just dwelled in that space, there's just no sustainability personally in that mindset. And so there's just no other way than just like focusing on the task at hand, seeing what is in our control, and leading, not trying to drag people along, Yeah. My mom used to say, can't pull on a green bean, make it grow.
I like that.
You can't?
Shoot.
My answer to that question is why not? Why not be positive? I just think about our culture at large right now. It's so divisive. Everything is negatively focused. And I think positivity is the one that can cut through that and allow people in, and it's inviting. It's radically inclusive. Positivity. It's infectious. I guess I'd much rather be a joyful person than one that's walking around bitter, looking at everything as, I can't do that, or I can't do this. And, I think Nike has a really good slogan, and it's actually just do it. Just do it and have fun. Yes, it's challenging to do what Cate and Duckworth are doing. It's incredibly challenging. But it's worth it. So, finding those things that are worth doing just brings so much joy and so much positivity to the room and to livelihoods. It's infectious in a positive way.
Yeah.
You guys are obviously doing really great work, but then the question comes to mind, how do you scale this? And I was thinking last night about the food business and how they manage to scale organic. I think there's a huge percentage of the population that is willing to pay more for organic because they understand the real cost, or they understand the cost of to their bodies, to the environment, whatever, of cheap food. And so I think that's a kind of a case study of how it can be done at scale, but y'all are on the very leading edge of this. So how do you think about scale? And the next question beyond that is, how do you measure success? What do you see as a good way to scale this thing beyond what y'all are just doing? And then how will you know when you've done it?
So for Range Revolution, or for leathers, I'll just touch on that. We've spent the past 2.5 years really building our supply chain. It's been a lot of work. And Range Revolution, it's a, young and growing brand. In order to really reach my mission, which is to find as many of these hides homes as possible, we're starting to broker our leathers to other brands. So there are other people who are interested in having this sort of either story of provenance to their textiles, a story of circularity, or, the regenerative sourcing. And so we're working with those other brands to broker the hides to them, and it's increasing our efficiencies within our own cost of goods, because rather than moving pallets around, we're moving truckloads around. And there's plenty of hides, there's a ton of square footage, and there's a lot of ranchers who, given the opportunity to sell into a value-added market, would jump at that opportunity. They might be out there already doing regenerative practices, and maybe they just aren't monitoring yet. So we can help them implement some of these simple things to start monitoring their ecological outcomes. So I think that it's got to be a collaborative effort across the industry, and so working with other brands is our approach to scaling.
Okay.
My simple answer is one garment at a time, Ed. Mm-hmm. Right? Or one handbag at a time. Mm-hmm. I was reading this morning, dating back to 2000, closet spaces have grown 60%. As a piece of clothing retires, replace that with a natural fibered garment that has it doesn't need to be 100% natural either. Just find something that has natural fibers and start creating that movement that way. But it really is one garment, one handbag at a time. A tangible way that we will look at it is, how many thousands of pounds of wool are we putting through the American supply chain? And as that number continues to grow, we are realizing success at that point. How many jobs are we helping create? How many American hands are we supporting day in and day out by creating value-added agricultural products? But yeah, I mean, the most tangible way that we can look at that again, we're in the business space, our sales growing, our units growing. But that is a mentality of one garment at a time, one handbag at a time.
Yeah.
And that's the best way to scale. Like the moment that you try to do like 1,000, you're biting off more than you can chew.
Do you have something else? Sorry.
I was going to touch on this,
please.
about the role of designer too. Is anybody in here a designer? Okay. Well, for the role of the designer, I was just going to say that in our supply chain, there are certain hides that roll through the system that say if we're working with another brand whose visual aesthetic really commands perfection, Range Revolution has assumed a different brand story in which we embrace natural characteristics as a part of our aesthetic. All skins are beautiful. Our freckles are beautiful. That bug bite on the bag is beautiful. It's not a flaw. It's a natural characteristic. And the reason we're positioning ourselves as such so that as the hides are moving through the supply chain, our customers and our, peers who command perfection, they will get that side of the supply chain, and Range Revolution is going to make use of the other ones that might have the bug bite or the scratch mark from the fencing. Or if there's a lighter skin, a cull cow, when there's a higher, this is very cattle industry, but you've got fats, which are younger steers, and you've got cull cows, which are older moms that might be sent to slaughter because they aren't breeding anymore. And they produce a thinner end product. So now we're actually using our approach where we start with the supply chain first and we design to solve the supply chain issue. So we're working on a couple of products that creatively make use of that thinner leather in, say, a woven design. So it's reversing that mindset of, really starting with the outcome in mind, which is that there should not be waste in this industry.
This goes back to a little bit of my earlier question about marketing, but ultimately at the end of the day, you need customers and you need to figure out a way to capture people's attention. And I feel like that's more challenging now than it's ever been. I was thinking this morning, I was nervous about this and I was procrastinating and looking at my phone and I thought, I probably consumed more information in the last 5 minutes than humans did in a week before the phones. And so, how do y'all think about capturing the minds of people? Because I think a lot of people, just like me, they're curious, they want to do the right thing, but they just don't know. They just simply don't know. So how do y'all think about capturing people's attention and getting this information in, obviously with a positive viewpoint?
I started my journey definitely I think a little too heavy in the cerebral altruism side of things. And what I've really settled into is, again, it's just got to lead with beauty. If the quality and the beauty of the product isn't there, it doesn't matter all of our good intentions. And so that's really how I'm approaching it. Really well made, really stunning silhouettes. Let the material and the design speak for themselves. And then when people enter into our space, when they learn about the story of the sourcing, the story of supporting the ranchers, the story of supporting organizations like Women in Ranching, that really makes them fall in love with the brand. But we capture them first through the aesthetic.
I think integrity plays such an important piece of that as well. The story that you're putting out there for the public to see has to match the story internally as well. In the marketing space, there's a whole term that was coined. It's called greenwashing. And that means we're telling a story, but that actually isn't the reality of what's going on. And it's all done to just promote more and more sales, more and more consumerism. So just telling the story in a very authentic, honest, truthful way that is integrous, that people can really lean into and attach themselves to. I would rather be associated with a company who's willing to own the flaws. Cate, I'll be the first one to sign up for a handbag that has a cattle scratch on it from the fencing. It's unique.
Yeah.
I think we live in a world in which people want to be unique, but we continue to buy the same things over and over and over and over again. Give me the thing that has a fencing scratch on it. That's way cooler.
Yeah.
But tell that story really well. Why is that? Well, we got to keep our cattle in this area, or, we're running them on Forest Service land that has it there. So it's telling that story, doing so with integrity that is so critical right now. And that's what we want to lean and lead with is integrity, honest, truthfulness. We've done that through the 4 or 5 years I've been at Duckworth. I mean, there's challenges that are just fraught in this industry, and we own those. But I think those are the things that people can really grasp onto, and they want to grasp onto. They are looking for something authentic. That's how good marketing can cut through all the other noise that's out there.
Yeah, we're working on some just more in-person activations too. Like it's tough. I mean, we all got to play in the digital space. Yep. Like, how do you differentiate a leather bag from another leather bag on a computer screen or on a phone screen? It's tough to break through. So we've been doing a lot more in-person activations, because the truth is, it's like when you see these and you feel these and you smell these, you understand the difference between this and, say, another leather that's pretty much just been coated in plastic. So we're getting back to in-person a lot.
I love that natural smell too of leather. I bought a wool sweatshirt from a company actually in Britain, so 100% wool, and I put it on, you could just smell the wool. It's like, oh yeah, I love that. It's so good.
Yeah.
I'd like to, if anybody in the audience has questions, if not, I've got tons more questions, but yeah, please.
Hi.
Hey.
I just want to say I started tearing up too, because it's just very close to home, and I just really appreciate you all sharing. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. Used to make, the 5th amount of shoes in the United States. The whole industry is gone. Cleveland used to be a big garment production area, pretty much gone. But I'm a graduate student at the Yale School of Environment. I'm working on a research project on how these regional clusters for sustainable circular fashion can help support a whole ecosystem. And there are a lot in the EU that are mainly waste, like collection, sortation, and then regenerating textiles. Some of them have a workforce development component, actually teaching people how to sew.
Cool.
But I'm noticing from the ones that I'll be planning to visit this summer, a lot of them do not include the fiber shed, the natural fibers, as a stakeholder within those clusters. And I'm curious to know, what would an ideal sort of cluster or community focus support system look like for you? Like, if you were to plug into these types of regional projects, what would you like to see?
Yeah, just bringing the farmer's voice to the table. Yeah. For so long, the farmers haven't had a voice at the table, and I think that's where a lot of this disconnect has happened. And so just invite producers to be at the table. And you'll learn a lot about what their challenges are. They'll learn a lot about what your challenges are. Like, these guys understand the wool industry is struggling with a high enough quality to use the wool in enough breadth of designs. So they're tackling that at the genetic level of the herd. So I just think a seat at the table. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We've got to listen to those voices and make those connections. I don't think there's a way to get to those sorts of levels of design with not including everybody that's going to have a part in that process of creating a good there. So, I reflect back too on some of these quote unquote ancient communities. I mean, they were developed around the fiber forward. Fort Payne, Alabama was the sock capital of the world at one point. I mean, they're centered in cotton fields in many ways. Woolrich was in Pennsylvania. There was herds of sheep there. So everyone was centralized in these communities with really one objective in mind, and that is supporting the local community by using what was available there to create goods for people. So yeah, I agree with Cate. I think that's the most important thing, is just getting every voice to the table so that we can really help one another and show that level of care. I think that's a key component. We have to care about what everybody's doing in the process.
Are you familiar with the shoe brand Veja?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys know about their story? They're an incredible example. That'd be an awesome case study, right? Like, those guys, they didn't start being like shoes. They actually started with, we got to fix this dilemma in the cotton industry. And they started at the cotton farmer level. And then they built the product And then they built the manufacturing. And so everywhere where they are growing the cotton for their shoes, they also have the manufacturing happening there. So they're doing this all over the world. So it's pollinating in different areas with that different level of integration. And they support the farmers. They give them the upfront contracts, and they pay them a premium above the commodity rates for cotton. And they've done that forever. And Veja doesn't lead with that story. They lead with it's cool, it's hip. People like recognize the brand, but it's baked into their ethos because that's how it was founded. And I see that as what makes our brands different is it's baked in as the center pillar around which we build these organizations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to TikTok, I learned about fabrics and taught me. Now, all this is true, so you guys can tell me if this is wrong. A lot of people talk about wool and linen being of the highest frequency. And there's a reason you don't mix them, because it actually cancels the frequency. And how, linen was used to be used in like hospitals, and people would heal more quickly because of the frequency. And wool, there's wool Band-Aids. I don't know anything about the history, but that led me to the decision that I will only purchase from now on wool and linen, like for my clothing. So I'm on the search to like finding really fun things to wear. And I went to your website right now. And I'm like, it's never cool. It's never like what I want to wear. It's never, I look at wool and I want to. I actually just yesterday sent a link to someone who wants to buy me underwear. Don't ask. And I'm like, I go, well, here's a site, I guess. They want thongs. Okay. Like the Bronin brand or whatever. Because I get ads, right? Because I've been searching, right? So I get ads, I get all the ads. And usually they're blends. But like, I'm still kind of like, it's not good enough. Like I want, where's the good stuff? And I don't know if there's like a directory of like all the companies I'd love to support. I just find that it's not good enough.
Yeah, but in the wool industry, and I'll just speak for Duckworth, like our primary focus is building timeless and functional pieces. So we're focused on t-shirts, we're focused on hoodies that you can wear up in the mountains, you can wear on the streets, you can wear it day in and day out without having to put it in a wash machine. But the American Wool Council has a very long list of brands that are utilizing wool, so I would definitely check there. One company that comes to my mind that's doing it in the United States using wool is called Janessa Leone. She's making pretty high-end fashion sweaters, so that might be of interest. But yeah, those are a couple places that I would look for. At least the wool industry is American Wool Council. They have some really good resources available.
Fibershed's another group. They've got a directory of brands. And then another one that's like again, elevated luxury, really nicely tailored is called Another Tomorrow. And ditto on Janessa Leone. Yeah. Of course, Range Revolution for all your leather needs. And
correct. Yes.
So the need to address the cultural gaps is something that I think about a lot for another area of agriculture. And it's a challenge. Our market research is showing that even though people are saying they are advocates of these things, their buying behavior is not the same. Yeah. So that cultural shift is such a big thing on all of our plates. Yeah. But another segment of that is buyer behavior. And buyers have more and more power all the time. Their power is growing more and more. Yeah. So what kind of marketing thoughts do you have? What kind of plans do you have in terms of agriculture in general to address that very specific market and that very specific audience?
The specific audience being the ones who we need to bring along with us?
Buyers.
Buyers, yeah.
Yeah.
You're saying retail buyers or just the average consumer?
Retail buyers. Yeah. So those who are making the decisions. Yeah. They're
we're trying to crack that nut. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's something that
well, they are going to follow what trend and what the zeitgeist is telling them to buy. Okay. So I do think that we have to start with pop culture and the zeitgeist and the influencers and the celebrities, and then the buyers. You got to make it cool. There's a I shouldn't say cute, but Shop Zero. So these two gals in LA who are creating essentially like an e-commerce platform akin to Revolve, but all sustainably sourced.
So maybe more from a food perspective, because from what we have seen, there's a lot of mandates coming from buyers, especially in terms of how things are grown. A lot of that regulation that kind of used to come from government officials are now coming from buyers. So maybe from a meat perspective, have you thought about how that integrates? I know that we're talking about textiles, but it's all kind of integrated. Has there been any work in terms of how to communicate to buyers and maybe a B2B marketing perspective?
I have not.
Okay.
I have not. The meat market is a really tough nut because of the way it's so consolidated. And so honestly, a lot of regenerative ranchers have just built their own D2C companies. Because trying to go B2B is impossible right now, and you can't compete because, I don't know if you're familiar with Cool, but essentially, carcasses from other countries can be brought in here, and as long as they are further cut here in the United States, it can be called a product of the United States. We've got big legislative gaps that we got to fill it sucks.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, agriculture has challenges coming from every direction.
I think too, just real quick, we don't do any B2B sales, but I think that's the power of e-commerce. We're putting the power not in the hands of a specific buyer. We're putting the power back in the hands of everyone in this room. And we all have the ability to vote with our dollar. And buyers are going to start picking up on that. And I think that's what you're alluding to, Cate, is if we start demanding change by the products that we are purchasing ourselves, they're going to pick up on that and make different choices. So I guess I wouldn't look to the buyers to make the choices that are best for us. Make your best choice.
Gary Hirschfield from Stonyfield Organics told the story when he was out there pounding the pavement trying to get his yogurt brand into grocery stores. He paid people to go to the grocery store. So we got to start thinking that way in unique tactics. So please go to all your department stores and ask for regenerative leather. So that's a great example of somebody who did that in food and he engineered it. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Faith Missick. I'm in sustainability reporting on the business side. So I actually had two questions. The first one, when I went to get a sustainability degree, it was in Paris. And so looking at the fashion there, fast fashion is almost looked down upon. And so has there been any research or collaboration with EU farmers and the textile industry on how to make a societal shift when it comes to fashion? And then my second question, when you're looking at things such as renewable energy credits that companies will buy for offsets in terms of emissions, has there been any research on how you can get something like agriculture sustainable fashion to be one of the projects that are funded?
One of my favorite textile shows is called the Future Fabrics Expo, and it takes place in London every summer. It's put on by a group called the Sustainable Angle. And I think in a lot of ways, in environmental policy, in food, and in fashion, the EU is always 5 to 10 years ahead of what's happened in America. And so they are much further along in this conversation. And it's already happening at a different pace. They have a different problem, or I should say, we have a very wonderful opportunity in that the scale of agriculture here in America is much bigger. So they're actually limited by the size and the presence of farms there. So their supply chain, say in leathers, is actually a lot smaller. So that's going to be their challenge to work on if they're truly trying to work within the eco-region. But you're right, they're always a bit ahead of us. And so that gives me hope that this conversation we're having, we're going to have, 10 more panels of this type at South by Southwest in the next few years. The conversation is going to get louder and it will be more prevalent. And then the second about offsets, yes, and that is a conversation. It's tough. A lot of them are talking about carbon specifically, and carbon is tough to quantify in an honest way. And companies have to be very, very careful about greenwashing because they are getting sued for greenwashing. So a lot of them are doing.
That's why I keep a job.
Yes, good. We gotta keep it real.
Yeah,
it's true. But we also got to recognize that just like regeneration on land, this process of rebuilding, we can't let perfect be the enemy of good. and progress. So this is going to be an incremental rebuild. And so I'm like, like when somebody gets attacked, like if they're truly being dishonest, call it out. But like, we have to acknowledge that like, we can't flip the switch on this. This is going to be quite the infrastructure rebuild, and people are going to be on a journey. I've been on a journey. I didn't know what filled my closet 5 years ago. I didn't think this way. So this is, we got to accept that incremental progress.
I think just that incremental progress is so important to this conversation. And I mean, transparently, we are using some synthetics in our garments, but we are trying to use wool wherever and whenever possible. You can't find a garment on our website that does not use wool from our ranch. And I mean, very quickly, wool is actually one of those fibers that sequesters the most carbon in the world. It's phenomenal. Again, we talked about it earlier. When the wool fiber is done, you can put that back in the ground and it's going to capture some of that. Whereas continuing to use oil-based fibers, we are desequestering carbon in doing so. So it's a fascinating topic. It's one that I'm certainly not an expert in whatsoever, but natural fibers, like they can do things that most people don't realize. They are phenomenal. And the more that we can use those incrementally in all that we do, the better off we're going to be.
Well, thank you all so much for coming. Thanks for the great questions. You made my job easier. Made it clear that I don't have as good questions as y'all, but I really appreciate it. These folks will be hanging around if you want to continue the Q&A, but thank y'all so much.
Can I give you guys one little thing to take out into the world? Like, take this conversation into your friend groups, into your families, because that is the pollination of the conversation. And just like, embrace this word stewardship. Every single one of us has a chance to be a steward in the world. And our daily decisions really do have that ripple within our own communities. And we all have a chance in whatever work we do to like accept that role as steward. And I think life gets richer when you feel that sense of belonging.
Hey, it's Ed again. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. I know your time is valuable, so it means the world that you spend it listening. If you want to support the podcast and help it to continue to spread and grow, there are a few ways you can help. Number one, pass it along to a friend or share it on social media. Word of mouth recommendations are the most powerful way for ideas to spread, so I'd love it if you could share the podcast with a few pals who might enjoy it. Number two, you can go to Apple Podcasts and give it a 5-star review. Good reviews encourage the Apple overlords to suggest the podcast to others. So there's a link in the notes if you'd be so kind as to give it 5 stars. Number 3, you can support the podcast financially via Patreon, and there are exclusive benefits for those who do, including a monthly behind-the-scenes newsletter, Mountain and Prairie stickers, live and recorded video chats with podcast guests, and much more. Number 4, I've also got 2 emails that I send out. The first is my weekly email called Good News from the American West, which I send out every Wednesday. It's only positive news, something we can all use a little more of these days. And my other email is my bi-monthly book recommendations email. One email every other month with 5, 6, 7, or 8 books that I've recently read and highly recommend. The thousands of people on both of these lists will vouch for me. No spam or other funny business. And number 5, finally, check out my online store for Mountain and Prairie stickers, shirts, and coffee mugs. I've got some really cool designs from Western artists with more on the way, so head to mountainandprairie.com/shop to check it all out. I'd love to connect with you. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, so look me up on either of those platforms by my name or through the links on my website. All right, that's it. Thanks so much for your support.